Dan the Wheelman here, and this is the 2021 Ford Bronco. But actually, that's not entirely true. This is the 2021 Ford Bronco Sport, and that's an important distinction to make because it's a bit of a different animal, even though it's got the same name, to the 2- and 4-door Broncos that are due to come later this year. This is based on the Escape crossover platform, whereas the other Broncos, the 2-4, I'll call it from now on, those are based on the Ford Ranger pickup. This vehicle here is a little more, perhaps, of the all-round vehicle. People that might be using this more as an everyday driver, for example. It's got 2 fuel-efficient engines, probably going to be easier to drive in the city than the full-size Bronco is going to be later. But that being said, it still has definite Bronco cues. Reminds a bit of the Bronco 2. You've got the Bronco-esque headlights here, the scripting across the front there. You've got matching scripting on the back tailgate, but it's interspersed with some very modern stylistic touches, such as the gunmetal finish on the alloy wheels there. You have the black roof rails, two-tone colored paint job with the blue and the black roof there, more rounded corners and so on. So it's a little more of a modern take, perhaps, on what the Bronco is, and it's aimed at a slightly different market as a result. At least that's what Ford's saying. Well, today we're going to take a drive to find out if they've made good on their word. So, stepping into the Bronco Sport, again, you've got a bit of a mix of the new and the old. You've got the proud Bronco logo on the steering wheel there, very, almost kind of Mustang-esque, actually. They've kind of given it its own brand, like they've done with the Mustang, which I like. You've got the gauge cluster here, which is kind of old school looking. You have dial-style shift selector, paddle shifters, all this kind of stuff. It's a pretty modern cockpit. This is the Badlands trim. That is the top trim, which means you've got everything. I've got a heated steering wheel. I've got heated seats. I've got, dual zone climate control. I have, the Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, and also, now this is not just a Badlands thing, also lots of great storage. I love this storage place here. You can put cell phone there, your glasses, wireless charging down here, and a pad for more storage in this bin here. Lots of good storage in here, and lots of good sound too with the B&O audio. And it's comfortable up here. It's surprisingly roomy, considering its size. I thought it would feel more snug, especially in the footwell here, but it hasn't. I'm actually quite happy. This plastic here is given kind of like a, almost like a sandpapery finish, so it's like a matted finish, so it's not going to scratch hopefully quite as easily. And all these surfaces here have a sticky rubbery coating so stuff doesn't slide around. All really, really good stuff. Let's have a look at that back seat. We'll talk about backseat space in a moment, but first there's some features back here I want to show you. First of all, you've got some under-seat storage here. It's got a rubberized bottom, so you could probably store wet items back there, won't be a problem. Or if you want to store items you want secured, like laptops or phones or whatever, you could probably fit that there too, although it does have a boot and a first aid kit icon on here, so chances are that's what Ford intends it to be used for. It might not have quite as much kind of utilitarian stuff as the Bronco 2.4 is going to have. That vehicle's got mounts for your GoPro, it's got mounts for your gear, all kinds of stuff all throughout the cabin, but there's still some good stuff here that's useful. First of all, each one of these on the seat back is a loop. You can attach gear to that. You have a zippered back pocket here, which has kind of like what looks to be like a waterproof or something liner as well. I'm not exactly sure, so I guess you can put snacks and stuff back there, won't be a problem. It's yellow in there, so that's a bit weird, probably the only way you can get the color, but whatever. I like how it's got a zipper pocket. Now, stepping in, the first thing that I've noticed is the door entry here is on the small side. It's quite narrow. I feel like I'm having to bring my shoulders in to get in properly. Once inside though, and sat beside behind the passenger, I like the room. My knees aren't jamming up against the seat back. I can look up. The bill of my hat doesn't bump the headliner. It's a test I always do in the back seat or in the front seat of vehicles as well. Even though I've got the sunroof housing back here, I've got headroom, lots of it, which is really kind of cool. And they have so much headroom back here, even with the sunroof, because of a pretty clever piece of design. You see, the way they've shaped this roof here, it's kind of hidden behind the roof rail, but you can see how it kind of raises up just past the front portion of the roof there, about halfway through, and that gives you all sorts of headroom in the back seat, but you don't see it as much because you've got the roof rail there. If I was behind the driver, of course, this driver's seat is fit for a tall driver myself. I have a feeling it'd be a little snugger for me, but this passenger still has some leg room, and that's fine. Now, of course, I mentioned how much room there was up front for the driver. All that space had to come from somewhere. So that's the back seat. I've got my armrest here with flush mounted cup holders. That's nice. No USB ports, which is too bad. This is the top trim of the Bronco Sport in Canada. I think the US gets a higher trim than this, but that is the top trim. So unfortunately, there's no USB ports back here, but there is a household outlet, so you can at least plug one device in back here if you need to charge it. And of course, you've got a folding seat back. The only thing is, it's a bit of a two-step it can be a bit of a two-step process. Right now, it should be okay. You hit the button on the shoulder of the seat here, comes down. It's also got a plastic backing back here as well, so you can store long items, not worry about scratching your seat back. However, with the seat back further on the front seat like it is there, you'd have to fold the headrest, and it doesn't happen with a single push of the button. You've got to first push the shoulder button, then you've got to push a button on the side of the headrest to fold it in and bring it down. Not a problem here, but behind that seat there, which is going to infringe on the space that the seat back has to fold down, you're going to have to drop that headrest. So all that interior stuff is cool, but one of the highlights for me, in fact, possibly the highlight for me when it comes to the Bronco Sports interior, is actually what's going on in the rear cargo area here. I know it's weird to wax poetic about basically the trunk of a small crossover like this, but just bear with me. First of all, there's the way you access it. It can be done in two ways. If you hit the button on the left-hand side of the backup cam here, just the glass portion opens. That's great because you can load items in on top of a shelf that's in there without having the whole thing open up and stuff maybe sliding out. That's one thing. Secondly, you can store longer items as well if you even come out the back a little bit. Just make sure you put your orange cautionary tape on there if you do that. Now, if you hit the button on the right-hand side of the backup cam, now it opens like a more traditional tailgate. Opens up nice and big. I can stand under here almost fully without hardly having to duck, just a little bit, which is great. In here, as you can see, I've got basically what is a security cover. You've seen this before in crossovers, not that kind of revolutionary, but just hold on a second. Well, first of all, there's this. It locks in magnetically, so you can fold it back and then have it lock in. It won't be shaking around while you're driving. And second of all, since you have that half opening glass option, you can load stuff in there and have it sit on top of the shelf there without having to open up the whole tailgate again. So it's almost like it's advantageous that in two ways. On top of that, you undo these locks here. You can slide this baby forward, lock it back in place just like that, and now pop these legs out here, and you've got a table, which you can, have lunch on, maybe work on your gear or whatever and so forth. That is pretty cool. Legs are a little on the flimsy side. I know they're kind of a bonus. They're a little on the flimsy side, but other than that, this is a pretty cool feature. And of course, you can remove the whole thing if you want as well, just by unlocking it. And also on the bottom of this cargo area, you have a washable, removable liner. All cool. And that's not all. So as I said before, there isn't as much kind of kit in here as you're going to get in the Bronco 2.4 that you can hang stuff off of and stuff, but there is stuff. You've got these clips right back here, which you can attach gear to, which is nice. You got some hooks down here as well. So if you want to attach your shopping bags or whatever, so your eggs aren't rolling all over the rear hatch when you're driving or when you're off-roading maybe, it won't. There's two on either side here. Then there's a 110 household outlet as well. You've got a 12V cigarette style outlet, and you've got this little button here which turns on lights in the top of the tailgate here, which is really, really cool. And then there's the pièce de résistance. I've got my drink here, and right over here I've got a bottle opener. Cheers. So I was thinking about wearing a cowboy hat for this review. I mean, this vehicle does have Bronco in its name after all, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this Bronco, the Bronco Sport, isn't really the cattle herding or the cattle herding type necessarily. So I decided to go with something a little kind of retro, but still modern at the same time. Very millennial, this hat. You've got the retro Hockey Night in Canada logo on there, but you've got the kind of, you know, you got the gray hat, the shape of the hat, everything like that. It's kind of it's a modern hat with a classic logo on it, which kind of speaks well to what's going on with this Bronco Sport here. When you look at it, there's no denying, as we mentioned in the interview, or in the intro rather, there's no denying that this is a it's a Bronco. It's got a Bronco silhouette, some of the stylistic features, I guess the headlights, you could say, the stance, the way the wheels are pushed really hard to the corners. But at the same time, it's got a modern twist on the proceedings, rounded corners. You've got those very futuristic looking wheels. And inside you've got Sync 3 here, although it's not the most modern sync you can get. There's a Sync 4 now available in some Ford vehicles. You've got B&O audio. You have the dial style shifter down here, paddle shifters up here. I'd say probably the most retro thing in this cockpit, in addition to, I guess, this gauge cluster, which aside from the big digital display between the two main gauges, those main gauges have very old school font on them, which I rather like. The most retro thing in here is this interior, this saddle brown interior that's a mix of suede and leather. So it's a really kind of intriguing mix of the two. This one's a little more for the outdoorsy type and weekend warriors, so on. Not the kind of people that are going to be blasting through Baja or going down to Moab, as Ford recently did with their Broncos, just to kind of throw it in the face of Jeep, but I found that very cool. Very nice little, one-upmanship there. So that's not really what this is for, but this is for people that are going to go to trailheads, that are going to go surfing even, although the Bronco, of course, is a very surf-style vehicle as well. And that kind of mentality is reflected in the power choices you get. Base Broncos come, wait for it, with a 3-cylinder turbocharged EcoBoost engine. It's good for 181 horsepower and 190 pound-feet of torque. This is the Badlands version. It's the only way in Canada you can get the 2-liter turbocharged engine that it has, and that makes 250 horsepower and 277 pound-feet of torque, which are fine figures. And, it sounds about right for what a vehicle like this needs. A small compact SUV, 2-liter turbo motor. That's kind of a sweet spot, isn't it? Those are some very fuel efficient, kind of more very hot hatchback-esque motors. And I believe the first time we saw that 3-cylinder EcoBoost in North America was in the Fiesta hatchback, I think. So, you can see where it got its roots. And I'm glad I've got the 2-liter here, because that 1.5-liter motor is a little bit wheezy in the vehicles in which I've sampled it. So this one here, great for fuel economy, but this one here gives you that much more that much more punch rather. Pinch or a punch. Anybody seen Donnie Brasco? Anyway, than the 1.5 will. So it's a great motor, it's responsive, it's quick, and it really makes this Bronco Sport feel like a vehicle that is little more than an engine, 4 wheels, and a steering wheel in a good way. It's not the ride's bad or it's super noisy in here or anything. It's just really responsive to throttle inputs and really fun to move through those 8 gears. It's a very, very athletic feeling compact sport utility vehicle, which, you know, at first blush anyway, which is obviously what Ford is going for with the Bronco Sport. It's likely the kind of thing that people buying a Bronco Sport or any of its competition from the likes of the, you know, Jeep Renegade or the Toyota RAV4 Trail, for example. This is the kind of thing that I think people looking for vehicles like that would be looking for. A nice punchy engine that's still pretty good on fuel. And that attitude's also kind of reflected in the drive modes I've got here. There are 7 of them, only they're not called drive modes in the Bronco Sport. They're called GOAT modes. Now, that's not GOAT in the animalistic sense. That's not GOAT even in the typical acronymical sense. Is acronymical a word? I don't know. Well, if it isn't, it is now. Don't at me. I'm going to use it anyway. By not typical, I mean it doesn't stand for greatest of all time. It's not Wayne Gretzky. What it stands for here in the Bronco Sport is goes over any type of terrain. Now, while officially it's spelled G-O-A-T, I guess that would be more G-O-A-T-T. But anyway, so that's what it stands for here. And these drive modes are here to help you in the city in terms of like eco or normal mode, and to help you on the highway in terms of sport mode and slippery mode, and stuff like sand, mud and ruts, and rock crawl when it's time to do a little bit of off-roading in your Bronco Sport. So now we're on the highway in sport mode, and again, great acceleration here. Vehicle like this really doesn't need much more than a 2-liter turbo motor. I mean, that's why that engine is so ubiquitous in the world of cars and small crossovers, even some bigger crossovers and SUVs and sedans these days. But it's just such a good kind of sweet spot in the internal combustion world. And it even has a sound. Listen. Not bad for a little kind of funky crossover. I'd rather like that. And of course, I want to select manual mode here. I hit the button on the gear selector dial, and I've got manual transmission with paddle shifters here as well, which is, again, kind of a cool little, you know, kind of a bonus, really. Of course, in addition to the manual mode, you've also got actually locking differentials in here as well, and plus hill descent control, and you've got trail control, which is basically like cruise control for off-road. It's a really cool way of just letting you focus on the steering when you're doing off-roading, and it does the rest. Brakes, throttle, transmission, all that kind of stuff does all that for you, and you know, it makes use of the cruise control system to do it. I can tell from the turns I'm going through that this is a pretty planted car, handles well, steering is direct, which is nice. It's even got a little bit of weight to it, although I have to say almost a little bit too much weight to it in some situations. When I was back in the city, this has an auto start stop function, which of course I'm sure I can turn off if I wanted to. Let me just find out. Well, I'm sure I can. Anyway, and a couple of yeah, there's the button right there for it. And in a couple of instances, I found it a little bit slow to react, and that can be a bit of problems if you're trying to get out of. If you're at 0 and you're trying to get out of your lane to get around a slow car ahead of you, or somebody who's decided to all of a sudden put on their left turn indicator, pet peeve of mine, at an intersection, precious seconds can be lost when the power steering isn't working properly because the engine's in off mode. And that's what happened with me a couple times, is trying to get out of the lane, try to turn the wheel, can't because the engine's not on, the electronic power steering isn't on, and I'm having to kind of fight it, and I lose. Might not seem like a lot of time, but when there's traffic zipping by you and you're going from stop, that can be costly. So I found that a little bit kind of off-putting, I guess. And while I am on the highway here, it gives me a chance to reflect on some of the other niceties in here. This sound system, this B&O sound system, is fantastic. Super crisp, not tinny at all. Really, really, really nice. I'm quite a fan and quite surprised by it, actually. Good set of driver aids in here. I've got, adaptive cruise control, lane keep assist, lane centering assist. I have blind spot system, all that kind of stuff. The only thing is, for one, the lane centering assist only works if you have cruise control active. And by lane centering, I mean the vehicle basically follow an imaginary line down the middle of the lane and keep you centered that way, which is great. But it only works with cruise control on. The lane keep assist system, which is of the more traditional variety, kind of bounces you off the lines a little bit. That works all the time, and that's great. The only thing is, I'm having trouble figuring out how to turn it off. I'm sure there's a way to do it, but there's no button right on here that I can use, no traditional hard button that I can use to just turn it on or off, which I'm kind of miffed about. I don't like having to search through menus, whether it be in my gauge cluster or in my infotainment display here, to turn off my lane keep assist system. I often find these systems to be annoying and overly invasive, as this one isn't the worst, but I still would like to find a way to turn it off. I'm sure there's a way to do it. I just haven't had a chance to find it yet. But, you know, I shouldn't have to worry about looking around to find it. There should be a button easily visible to press that I can use to deactivate it. A few clicks down the road now, and I have an update for you because, you know, got to do the vehicle due justice. I have found the lane centering off button, and it's on the end of the stalk right here. I can't recall ever seeing that control on an indicator stalk before, hence why I was having trouble finding it previously, but there it is. So I retract my earlier statement a little bit. You can still turn on or off with one button. Still a bit tough to find, although now I know that it's here, I'll be able to use it from now on. And when on, it's still a little bit over invasive. The only other thing I have is, since it is on here, is there a chance I might activate or deactivate that system just when using the indicator for a normal lane change on the highway? Is that possible? Maybe if I had gloves on or something, it might be. So something to keep in mind. And though this surely won't be the model that most people are going to get if they want to go off-roading, they'll wait for the later Broncos for that, the 2 or 4. But as I go over these bumps, here's light off-roading, admittedly, but as you go over these, you know, this vehicle feels like it's up for it. You know, it doesn't, I'm in mud rut right now as I go through this rough gravel right here, you know, it holds itself together rather well, and there's some good ground clearance and everything. Let's go through some more bumps right here, and it absorbs it all with gummers. It's a short wheelbase, so you're going to get some up and down motion, but you do have an independent rear and the rear suspension there, so that helps with ride and control overall. Plus you've got a locking differential. So, you know, this is a vehicle that will definitely be able to get you to the trailhead on forestry roads, probably no problem whatsoever. You do have to pay for it a bit, as I mentioned before, or if I didn't, I'll mention it now. It starts about 32 grand for the three-cylinder model. This one here is up closer to 46 grand for the 2-liter with the Badlands, all the trim. So it's not, I wouldn't say it's necessarily inexpensive for its segment. That's pushing to the upper echelon of pricing in the segment, that is. But you can just, you know, if you can get by with that 3-cylinder, there's more to choose from. I guess it's too bad the 2-liter isn't available in maybe a few more trims. As of right now, I think only the Badlands offers it, which is too bad, because I think it'd be nice to be able to get the extra power without having to get all the extra Badlands fanciness, the 2-tone interior, all that kind of stuff. But that unfortunately isn't an option as of right now. We'll see what happens down the road. At the end of the day though, the more I had the keys to this, not necessarily the more I was actually driving it, but the more I knew I had the keys in my possession, the more I looked forward to getting back into it and going for a drive. There's just so much to like here. The styling, the features inside, the surprising amount of space in the back, the kit in the back cargo area, which I talked at length about. The powertrains are good. The tech up here is nice. It's a really good mix of stuff. And chances are, this is probably going to outsell the Bronco 2.4. This competes in just a much more competitive, a much busier segment, the small or compact crossover segment, than whatever segment the Bronco and the Wrangler and the Land Rover Defender compete in. I guess, you know, off-road SUV segment or whatever you want to call it. You could probably throw the 4Runner in there too from Toyota. This is just a more competitive segment. This vehicle makes more sense in the city. It's got the great fuel-efficient engines, especially that 1.5-liter one, which, you know, I can't attest to how fuel-efficient it is. I haven't tested it, but I can imagine. And, you know, and then it's all wrapped up in that really, really cool-looking package. A package which, by the way, the more people started looking at it, the more they started liking it too. I had somebody come to me when I first picked this up and say, that's not the Bronco I was expecting. But that's because it isn't the Bronco they were expecting. This is the Bronco Sport. But then they talked to me a couple days later and they said, actually, that's kind of cool looking. I even had somebody who is a big Bronco fan, she loves old Broncos, say, yeah, it's not bad. I think she still wants to find herself an old 1960s one, but that's a story for another day. But she was like, yeah, it's pretty good. So, you know, it grows on you, this vehicle, and it's really, really good. And the more I was away from it, the more I want to drive it. And it's hard to give kind of a better vote of confidence than that, in my opinion, when it comes to a vehicle. They've done well with this, and they're going to do well, too. I think they're going to sell a boatload of these. Anyway, thank you for tuning into my review of the 2021 Ford Bronco Sport. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please do. If not, no hard feelings, of course. You can follow me on Twitter at Dan the Wheelman. Wheelman, and on Instagram at Dan the Wheelman as well. Look for a full story and pics of this Bronco Sport on vicariousmag.com sometime soon. But until then, thanks for tuning in, and sayonara, folks.